Hey there, friend. Pull up a chair. This is going to be quite the story. My name's Margaret Whittaker, and if you're looking for drama, you've come to the right place. But first, let me set the stage. I live in a cozy little town called Maplewood, nestled somewhere between rolling hills and endless rows of oak trees that turn golden every fall. My house. Well, it's not just any house, it's the house. The one my parents built back in the 50s, where I raised my two kids, Emily and Benjamin. It's got creaky wooden floors, a porch swing that sways with the breeze, and a garden that smells like lavender on summer evenings. People around here call it the Whittaker House, as though it belongs to everyone except me. And honestly, sometimes I wonder if they're right. Life was quiet until recently. Too quiet, some might say. I spent my days gardening, baking pies, my apple pie is legendary or so I've been told, and chatting with neighbors over coffee. But don't mistake peaceful for perfect. There were cracks beneath the surface, ones I chose to ignore. Like how Emily hadn't visited in months unless she needed something, or how Gregory, her husband, always seemed to look down his nose at me like I was some relic from another era. Still, I figured those were just growing pains. You know, the kind all families go through. Boy, was I wrong. So here's the deal. By the time this story ends, you'll see just how far I had to go to reclaim what was mine, and maybe even teach a few people a lesson along the way. If you're curious about what happens next, hit that subscribe button and stick around. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Let me tell you about the night everything started to unravel. It was a chilly October evening and I'd invited Emily, Gregory, and their little boy, Liam, over for dinner. Now, I should have known better than to expect warmth from Gregory. He's the type who wears suits even to barbecues. But I thought at least Emily would appreciate the effort. The table was set with my good china. The pumpkin soup was simmering on the stove, and I'd baked an extra-large batch of chocolate chip cookies for dessert. Everything seemed fine, until Gregory leaned back in his chair, sipped his wine and said, "Margaret, Mom and Dad are coming to visit next month. They'll need a place to stay." At first I thought he meant a hotel or something. But no. He wanted them to stay here in my home. In my bed practically. I tried to laugh it off, saying, "Oh, surely there are nicer places for them to stay nearby?" That's when Emily chimed in, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Mom, why can't you just make room for family? Don't you care about us anymore?" Care about them? Of course I did. But letting strangers take over my life? Not a chance. I didn't say much that night. I never do when I'm angry, but I could feel the tension thickening in the air. Little did I know this was only the beginning. A week later, I got an email from Emily. Yes, an email. Not a phone call, not a face-to-face conversation. Just cold, impersonal text glaring back at me from my laptop screen. Read. "Mom, Greg and I have talked, and we think it's best if you consider moving out temporarily while his parents visit. It's only for a few weeks and it would mean so much to our family. If you refuse, well, I don't know how things will work moving forward." Moving forward? What kind of threat was that supposed to be? I sat there staring at the screen, feeling a mix of disbelief and hurt. How could my own daughter treat me like this? Did she really think I'd pack up my life just to make room for her in-laws? I replied politely but firmly, telling her I wouldn't leave my home, not for anyone. But deep down I knew this wasn't going to end well. Emily wasn't the type to back down easily, especially when Gregory was whispering in her ear. Something told me bigger trouble was headed my way. It came in the mail 2 weeks later. A legal document stamped with official seals and signatures. Apparently, Emily had hired a lawyer to argue that she was entitled to partial ownership of the house because of some half-baked promises I'd made years ago. "This has always been your home," I'd once said to her during a particularly emotional moment after her father passed away. Now those words were being twisted against me. Can you believe it? I felt sick to my stomach as I read through the paperwork, each sentence hitting harder than the last. They weren't just asking for space. They were trying to take control of everything I held dear. I called my neighbor Evelyn Harper immediately. She's the kind of woman who knows everyone and everything, sharp as a tack with a heart of gold hidden beneath her no-nonsense exterior. When I showed her the letter, she shook her head and said, "Margaret, you're not fighting this alone. We're going to show them exactly who they're messing with." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I didn't have to roll over and play victim after all. Evelyn didn't waste any time. Over tea and biscuits the next morning, she laid out a plan so bold it almost made me choke on my Earl Grey. "Buy the whole block," she said matter-of-factly, as though suggesting I repaint the living room. What? I spluttered. How am I supposed to do that? I'm retired, Evelyn. But she just smiled that knowing smile of hers. You've got equity in this house, Margaret. Refinance it, sell off some investments, you'll be surprised how far it goes. Besides, most of these houses are practically falling apart. No one else wants them. The idea sounded insane, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If I owned the entire street, I could protect myself, and maybe send a message to Emily and Gregory while I was at it. So with Evelyn's help, I took the plunge. Buying the dilapidated house next door was easier than I expected. The owner practically threw the keys at me, happy to unload the property. As I stood in the empty living room, dust swirling in the sunlight, I couldn't help but grin. This was the start of something big. That first house smelled like damp wood and old memories, but I didn't care. Standing in the middle of the dusty living room, I felt a strange sense of power. A spark of rebellion that had been missing for far too long. Evelyn was right. This wasn't just about buying real estate. It was about taking back control of my life. I hired a contractor to fix the place up. Nothing fancy, just enough to make it livable. Within weeks, the house transformed from an eyesore into something charming. Cream-colored paint replaced peeling wallpaper, creaky floorboards were sanded smooth, and new curtains let sunlight stream through the windows. The final touch. A for rent sign planted proudly in the front yard. When Emily drove by and saw what I'd done, her jaw nearly hit the steering wheel. She pulled over, marched up to me and demanded, "What are you doing, Mom? Are you trying to compete with us or something?" Compete. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. No, sweetheart. I'm just making sure I have options. Her face turned red, but she didn't say another word. Instead, she stormed off, muttering under her breath about how unreasonable I was being. Unreasonable? Maybe. But I wasn't backing down, not now, not ever. One house turned into 2, then 3, then 4. Before I knew it, half the block belonged to me. Each property became its own little project, a puzzle to solve and a story to tell. There was the blue Victorian with the turret that rented out as an Airbnb, the brick bungalow perfect for retirees, and even a quirky studio apartment above the old garage where a local artist set up shop. Word spread around town faster than I expected. Some neighbors cheered me on, calling me a hero for revitalizing the area. Others whispered behind closed doors, accusing me of hoarding properties or ruining property values. Let them talk, I didn't care. What mattered was that I was building something real, something mine. Emily, of course, grew increasingly suspicious. Every time she called, it was the same questions. "Why are you doing this, Mom? What's the point?" I could hear the panic in her voice, though she tried to hide it. Gregory must have been putting ideas in her head again, probably worried I'd uncover whatever skeletons he kept locked away in his polished mahogany closet. Little did they know the best was yet to come. It happened while renovating the 5th house, a tiny cottage tucked at the end of the street. Beneath layers of rotting wallpaper, I found a stack of old letters tied together with faded ribbon. At first glance they seemed unremarkable, but as I read through them my blood ran cold. The letters were written by none other than Emily herself, dated years before she married Gregory. In one particularly damning note, she confessed to secretly listing our family home for sale without telling me. Her plan? To cash in on the equity and move somewhere better, closer to Gregory's social circle. Thankfully, the deal fell through when potential buyers backed out due to zoning issues. I sat on the floor of that empty cottage, clutching the letters in trembling hands. Betrayal stung worse than I ever imagined. This wasn't just about money or convenience, it was personal. My own daughter had plotted to sell me out, literally and figuratively. Evelyn found me hours later, still sitting there staring blankly at the wall. Without saying a word, she handed me a cup of tea and sat beside me. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "She's crossed a line, Evelyn. And now so will I." Gregory struck next, of course. He couldn't stand seeing me gain ground, not when it threatened his precious image. One morning, a letter arrived from the city council citing zoning violations on several of my newly acquired properties. According to them, I needed permits for renovations I'd already completed, and if I didn't comply within 30 days, fines would pile up faster than I could pay them. Typical Gregory move, underhanded and calculated. I could practically hear his smug laugh echoing through the pages of that letter. But he underestimated 2 things: my determination and Evelyn's network. Evelyn made a few phone calls digging up dirt on Gregory's law firm. Turns out he wasn't exactly squeaky clean. Bribery allegations, shady client deals, and questionable ethics violations surfaced almost immediately. Armed with this information, I decided it was time to play dirty. Things came to a head during Liam's birthday party, a painfully awkward affair held at my insistence. Emily brought Gregory naturally, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every smile felt forced, every laugh hollow. Even poor Liam seemed confused by the frosty atmosphere. At one point, Emily cornered me in the kitchen, her voice low but venomous. "You're ruining everything, Mom. Do you realize that? You're tearing this family apart." I looked her straight in the eye, holding up the stack of letters I'd found. "No, Emily. You did that the moment you decided this house and me weren't good enough for you anymore." Her face went pale as she realized what I was holding. For a split second I thought she might cry. Instead, she snatched the letters and stormed out, dragging Gregory behind her. The party ended abruptly after that, leaving me alone with half-eaten cake and a heavy heart. But as I cleaned up the mess, I realized something important. I wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever came next, I was ready. The days following Liam's disastrous birthday party felt like walking on eggshells. Emily stopped answering my calls, and Gregory's smug grin became a permanent fixture whenever he drove past my house. But the real kicker came when I received a formal complaint from the city council. Not just about zoning violations, but also allegations of harassment filed by none other than Gregory himself. Apparently, according to him, I'd been intimidating tenants and monopolizing neighborhood resources. The accusations were laughable, but they stung all the same. Word spread quickly thanks to Maplewood's infamous gossip mill, and soon enough, people started looking at me differently. Neighbors who once waved hello now avoided eye contact. Even the local coffee shop barista hesitated before handing me my usual latte. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I being too aggressive? Too vengeful? But then I remembered those letters, the ones Emily had written plotting behind my back, and I straightened my spine. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. And if anyone thought I'd roll over and play victim, they clearly didn't know Margaret Whittaker. I decided to fight fire with fire, or rather charm with charm. With Evelyn's help, I organized an open house event for my renovated properties, inviting everyone in town. Neighbors, business owners, even members of the city council. I baked pies, decorated each unit with fresh flowers, and made sure every corner gleamed under the afternoon sun. When the guests arrived, they weren't greeted by some stuffy realtor. They were welcomed by me. I gave tours, shared stories about how each property came to be, and emphasized how these renovations benefited the entire community. By the end of the day, opinions had shifted dramatically. Locals praised my efforts, calling me a visionary and a pillar of the neighborhood. Gregory showed up late, his tailored suit glaringly out of place among the casual crowd. He tried to sow seeds of doubt, muttering things like, "This is unsustainable," and "She's hiding something." But no one listened. Not when they could see the truth for themselves. As he stormed off, red-faced and fuming, I couldn't help but smile. Checkmate, Gregory. Just when I thought things couldn't get better, a man named Mr. Thompson approached me during the open house. He introduced himself as a former client of Gregory's law firm and handed me a folder thick with documents. Inside were emails, financial records, and signed affidavits detailing unethical practices within Gregory's company. Everything from falsified contracts to illegal fee structures. "I've been waiting for someone to take him down," Mr. Thompson said with a grim smile. "And let's just say you're exactly the kind of person I hoped would come along." My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, my mind racing with possibilities. This wasn't just ammunition, it was a game changer. For the first time, I saw a clear path forward. Gregory had spent years manipulating people and bending rules to suit his needs. Now it was my turn to turn the tables. Filing the lawsuit was both terrifying and exhilarating. Terrifying because I knew it would expose me to scrutiny. Exhilarating because I finally had the upper hand. The media caught wind of the case almost immediately, turning it into a headline-grabbing spectacle. Headlines like "Local Hero Takes on Power-Hungry Lawyer" dominated the news cycle, painting Gregory as the villain he truly was. During the trial, evidence poured in, from Mr. Thompson's documents to testimonies from disgruntled clients who stepped forward after seeing the coverage. Emily, caught in the crossfire, looked increasingly desperate. She begged me to drop the charges, claiming she hadn't known about Gregory's misdeeds. Part of me wanted to believe her, but the other part couldn't forget the betrayal etched in those old letters. In the end, the judge ruled decisively in my favor. Gregory's license was suspended pending further investigation, and his reputation lay in ruins. As we left the courtroom, cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sorrow. Winning didn't feel as sweet as I'd imagined. After the trial, Emily showed up at my doorstep unannounced. Her eyes were swollen, her voice trembling as she pleaded for forgiveness. "I messed up, Mom. I let Gregory control me and I hurt you. I'm so sorry." Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. But another part, the part that still loved her fiercely despite everything, softened. I invited her inside, poured us both cups of tea, and listened as she poured out her heart. She admitted she'd been blinded by ambition, seduced by Gregory's promises of wealth and status. "But none of it matters without you," she whispered. "Please give me another chance." It wasn't an easy decision. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, especially after wounds as deep as ours. So I nodded slowly. "We'll start fresh," I said. "But on my terms. No more lies, no more manipulation." Emily agreed, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to hope. Liam's second birthday marked a tentative new beginning. This time there were no hidden agendas or simmering tensions, just laughter, cake, and family. Watching Emily play with her son, I realized how much she'd changed. Gone was the entitled woman who thought money solved everything. In her place stood a humbled mother determined to do better. Gregory, however, remained conspicuously absent. His career in shambles, he'd moved out of state to avoid further scandal. While I didn't miss him, I couldn't deny the emptiness his absence left in Emily's life. She was learning to stand on her own 2 feet, free from his toxic influence. As the sun set over Maplewood, casting golden light across my beloved street, I felt a profound sense of peace. The battle was over, but the war, a quieter, gentler one, was just beginning. Rebuilding a relationship with Emily wasn't easy. It required patience, forgiveness, and countless awkward conversations over cups of tea. At first, she tiptoed around me like I might explode at any moment. She'd ask permission before making decisions, even small ones like whether Liam could have an extra cookie, and constantly second-guessed herself. But slowly things began to shift. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight, Emily finally opened up about her struggles. "I used to think happiness was about having more," she admitted. "A bigger house, fancier clothes, a perfect life. But none of it mattered when I lost you." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For so long I'd been angry at her betrayal, angry at Gregory's manipulation, angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. But now, sitting here with my daughter, I realized something important. Anger only kept us stuck. Forgiveness, though difficult, offered a way forward. That night I hugged her tightly and said, "We're going to be okay, sweetheart. We just need time." And for the first time in years I truly believed it. As winter approached, Maplewood transformed into a wonderland of twinkling lights and frost-covered trees. My properties had become the heart of the neighborhood, hosting everything from holiday markets to charity events. Locals affectionately referred to me as the Block Queen, a title I wore with pride. One snowy afternoon, Evelyn stopped by with hot cocoa and a mischievous grin. "You've done wonders for this town, Margaret," she said, raising her mug in a toast. "Who knew buying a few houses would turn you into a local legend?" I laughed, but deep down I felt a swell of gratitude, not just for Evelyn's support, but for the community that had embraced me despite everything. Even those who once doubted me now waved hello or dropped off baked goods as tokens of goodwill. Still, there was one loose end left to tie up. Sure enough, Gregory's parents arrived unannounced one chilly December morning, their designer luggage clinking against the cobblestones as they knocked on my door. They looked utterly bewildered when I greeted them with a polite smile and handed them keys to a tiny studio apartment across the street. We assumed," Mrs. Hargrove stammered, clearly flustered. "You assumed wrong," I replied gently but firmly. "This is your home for the duration of your visit. Rent is due on the 1st of each month, and please keep noise levels down after 10 p.m. They protested, of course, but eventually relented. Watching them struggle to adjust to their modest accommodations was oddly satisfying. By the time they left 2 weeks later, they were humbler, and perhaps a little wiser for the experience. With Gregory out of the picture and our family slowly healing, Emily began focusing on her own growth. She started attending therapy sessions, determined to unpack years of insecurities and misplaced ambition. To my surprise, she even joined me in managing some of the rental properties, using her organizational skills to streamline operations. Benjamin, meanwhile, returned from his travels and settled into a cozy cottage down the street. His presence brought a warmth to the neighborhood that had been missing for far too long. Together, the three of us formed a new kind of family, one built on honesty, mutual respect, and shared purpose. For the first time in years, I felt truly content. My children were thriving, my business was flourishing, and my home was filled with laughter once again. New Year's Eve marked the culmination of our journey. I hosted a grand gala in the newly renovated Victorian house next door, inviting friends, neighbors, and even former critics. The theme? From Ashes to Empowerment. Guests marveled at the transformation of the block, sharing stories of how my efforts had revitalized the area. Emily gave a heartfelt speech, thanking me for teaching her the value of resilience and integrity. Benjamin cracked jokes, keeping everyone entertained, while Liam chased sparklers around the yard like a tiny whirlwind of joy. As fireworks lit up the sky, I stood on the porch looking out at the bustling crowd. Evelyn sidled up beside me, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Well, Margaret Whittaker," she said, linking her arm through mine, "you've certainly earned your happily ever after." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned. It was messier, harder, and far more unpredictable, but it was also richer, fuller, and infinitely more rewarding. Just when I thought I'd seen the last twist in this wild tale, Evelyn dropped a bombshell during one of our weekly coffee dates. "You know," she began casually, stirring sugar into her cup, "I might have nudged things along a bit." "What do you mean?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. She shrugged innocently. "Let's just say I may have fabricated a document or two to ensure Gregory couldn't wriggle out of trouble. Oh, and I anonymously tipped off the media about his shady dealings." "You're welcome." I stared at her, dumbfounded. All this time I'd thought I was fighting my battles alone, but Evelyn had been pulling strings behind the scenes. Instead of being upset, I burst out laughing. "You sneaky devil," I exclaimed, hugging her tightly. "Hey, someone had to level the playing field," she quipped. "Besides, look where it got you." And she was right. Thanks to her meddling, and my determination, I'd reclaimed my life and rebuilt my family stronger than ever. Inspired by my journey, I decided to write a memoir titled From Evicted to Empowered. It chronicled my struggles, triumphs, and lessons learned along the way. To my astonishment, it became a bestseller, resonating with readers worldwide. Letters poured in from people sharing their own stories of resilience and redemption. Emily found her calling in advocacy work, helping women escape toxic relationships and reclaim their independence. She often credited me as her inspiration, which made my heart swell with pride. Benjamin, ever the adventurer, turned his photography hobby into a thriving career, capturing the beauty of everyday life in ways that moved people to tears. Together we proved that no matter how broken things seem, healing is always possible. On a crisp spring morning, I sat on my porch swing, sipping coffee and watching Emily play tag with Liam in the front yard. Birds chirped overhead, and the scent of blooming lilacs filled the air. Life had come full circle in the most unexpected ways. As I gazed at the vibrant neighborhood I'd helped create, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, for my family, my friends, and the courage to fight for what mattered most. So here's my advice to anyone reading this. Don't let fear hold you back. Stand tall, speak your truth, and never underestimate the power of a determined woman with nothing left to lose. After all, sometimes the greatest victories come from the hardest battles. And with that, dear reader, I'll leave you with this final thought. Home isn't just a place, it's the love, strength, and resilience we carry within us.